Hi, welcome to my channel where I bring you lampworking tutorials and demonstrations. Today I'm going to show you how to make a little tortoise figurine, such as this one here. So let's dive right in. To make my tortoise, I will be using my graphite pad, graphite paddle, my marble mold, and my grabbers. As for glass, I will be using a rod of Mystery Aventurine, a rod of unobtainium, a 12mm clear rod, and a 5mm clear rod. I also have a couple spare rods of clear glass in the background to use as punnies. So starting out here, I am going to be using both my inner and outer flame, and I'm just creating a nice bushy neutral flame and going right in with that 12mm clear rod, just introducing that into the flame and then forming a gather that's going to be approximately 3/4 of an inch to an inch in diameter. And then I'm just going to press that on my graphite pad to form a little disc. You can see what that's looking like here. And now I'm going to swap that 12mm rod with the disc into my left hand and pick up my Mystery Aventurine. And I'm going to go ahead and start gathering that color and fuse it onto the middle of the disc, and then continue twisting it and adding additional color onto the disc. And I'm basically just trying to add enough glass that it'll fill out my marble mold pretty nicely, so you can kind of see the little Hershey's Kiss there. And now back into the flame, I'm going to go ahead and just hit this directly with the flame using my graphite paddle to keep the back of the disc flat. And I'm just going to melt that in until everything is fully fused to the clear glass and it's nice and soft. And then I'm using my marble mold here to start shaping that. So here you can see our tortoise shell starting to take shape. So I'm going to dip that in the flame one more time just to give it a quick polish, and then drop down to just my inner flame. And I'm going to go in with that 5mm rod and start laying down a 6-dot pattern that will form the design on our tortoise shell. Here you can kind of see what the first inner layer of that dot pattern looks like. You can see it has 1 dot in the center with 6 dots surrounding the central dot. And then I'm going to go in and basically just continue adding more dots around the outside of the pattern. Basically, you just want to lay your dots down in between where the 2 dots in the previous row are, and just continue that all the way out until you reach the end of your color. This is the same dot pattern you would use to make a honeycomb, and it's also the same dot pattern I use when I'm laying down petals for implosion flowers, so it's definitely a helpful one to practice and make sure that you're getting good at. Now you can see the shell is covered in dots completely, so I'm going to go ahead and bump back up to my outer flame, and basically I'm just going to use my graphite paddle to keep the back of the shell flat while I go ahead and blast the top of the shell with heat, and I'm basically just fully melting in all of those clear dots until they're completely flush with the piece. So I'm just making sure that everything's nice and polished here. And I'm letting this cool down just a little bit so I can show the camera and you can kind of see how that dot pattern is coming together and what that should look like at this point. So now I am happy with this shell, so I'm going to go ahead and heat up the end of a punny here. And I'm going to go ahead and fuse that just right directly on top of the tortoise shell, and then just use my flame to cut off my 12mm rod from the bottom. And I'm going in with my tweezers just to pull off a little bit of the excess glass that's left over there. And I'm basically just pulling off enough that all I'm left with is just this little tiny extra dot there. And now I'm going to hit that with the flame and just melt it in and use my graphite pad to flatten the back so it's nice and flush and even. And once I have everything flush there, you can kind of see we have our first step, our tortoise shell, ready to go. So back into the flame here for another quick polish on the bottom of the piece, and then I am dropping back down to my inner flame and starting to introduce that rod of unobtainium, just kind of straightening things out there. But I'm going to introduce that unobtainium, and I'm going to start adding glass to the bottom of the tortoise shell where I want the legs to be. Basically, you want to aim for the outer edge of the shell for each of these legs and put them about 90 degrees away from each other, kind of across from each other where you would expect tortoise legs to be. At this point, I'm not too worried about melting them until they're even. I'm just trying to make sure that I'm adding an even amount of glass for all 4 of my legs and focusing on getting the placement right. At this point, I'm just adding that last leg on there. You can see me fusing that here and cutting off that rod of unobtainium. So at this point, I have all my legs added. They're at different stages of being melted. They're all a little bit wonky, but that's totally fine because the next step here is to go ahead and just blast those with heat until they're nice and even and rounded out. And you do just want to make sure you're kind of watching what you're doing here and using gravity to make sure that the legs are still staying separate and not fusing to each other. So now you can see how those look all nice and round and even. So now I'm focusing the heat just on the bottom, and then I'm just gonna press down on my graphite pad there to make some nice little flat tortoise feet. And everything is looking good here, so I'm kind of deciding which direction I want my tortoise to face. And I'm going back in with my unobtainium rod to give my little tortoise a head. So I'm basically just adding glass in between 2 of the legs that I thought looked good as front legs and cutting that rod. And you do want a decent amount of glass here. And again, when you're adding it, it's fine if it looks a little wonky, because after you add that glass, you can go ahead and melt it in so it's nice and even, and just use gravity to get a good angle so that that head is lifted up a little bit. So once I'm happy with how that head is looking, I'm going to go back in with my rod of unobtainium and just add a very small amount of glass directly across from the head. That's going to form my little tiny tortoise tail here. So you can see what that's looking like. And at this stage, my tortoise is pretty much done. The last step here is just to go ahead and take him off my punny using my grabbers here, and then just using my inner flame to polish off the punny mark on the top of the shell. And then this little guy is ready to go directly into the kiln. As always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more glass blowing tutorials and lifestyle content. And here's a nice close-up of how this little tortoise turned out. As always, I will post the link to my Etsy shop on the screen here in case you want to go check out and see what I have available there. But thank you so much for watching and have a great day.